everybody, it's Dr. Sarah Gottfried. Welcome back to the Health Bridge. I'm here with my co-host, Dr. Pedram Shojai.
Hello. Hi, Sarah. Hi, everybody. We're getting so many comments and emails and inquiries about all kinds of stuff that I'm just excited to have like a feedback loop. I mean, hanging out with Sarah is like delightful, but hanging out with Sarah and all y'all has been really cool. So thanks for being a loyal listener, and thanks for giving us comments and kind of helping direct us in directions where you guys need help, and that's what we're here for.
Exactly right. The party's better with all of us there. And I feel like, you can't go to a party without coming into grains and just, starting that downward spiral. It's like falling down stairs when you start to eat grains. And I just want to talk a bit about grains and what a problem it is for so many people. I think a lot of folks don't understand that it may not just be that gluten is the, kind of public enemy number one. It's this larger problem of grains. So I wanted to talk about kind of the pros and cons of grains today and to maybe have a balanced perspective on it. What do you think, Pedram?
Yeah, dig it. Grains are kind of the hallmark of civilization. I mean, grains helped us build cities. Grains helped us kind of concentrate, resources and be able to build libraries and Eiffel Towers and all this type of stuff because we had a lot more readily available energy. And we were able to create a market economy where, the farmers did what they did and the rest of us kind of specialized and moved away from food. And there's pluses and minuses that have been the fallout of that. But look, we get a lot of energy out of grains. And, you talk to some of the highest peak performing people in our society, like Olympic athletes and stuff like that. They're eating grains, right? Because they're getting super bursts of energy out of that, and they're using that to do what they do and impress us with their marvelous feats. So it's not all bad, and it's so hard in our culture. As soon as something has a problem with it, it's immediately put in the penalty box. And so hopefully we can have a balanced discussion about grains today.
Yeah, good. I was looking at the New York Times bestseller list recently, Pedram, and I saw that, 4 or 5 in the top 20, 4 or 5 books were addressing this issue of grain. Some of it comes from the paleo community and this movement away from the foods that were introduced later, as you just described, in the industrial age, such as grains. And 10,000 years ago, I think, was when grains first came in. And then there's also Grain Brain, right? We've talked about Grain Brain, David Perlmutter's book. There's the Grain Brain Cookbook. There's Wheat Belly Cookbook, etc. So I've been thinking about this and doing some research, and I've been frankly underwhelmed by the scientific rigor of the problems with grain. I really believe that it is a problem. I've seen that in my own body. I've seen it in plenty of patients, especially people who have blood sugar dysregulation or, certain food intolerances. But I am just finding that the science is lagging behind some of this, popular opinion.
It's really easy to get media impressions and hits by demonizing something that everyone is doing or eating, right? I should come up with like a water manifesto and say, well, you know what I mean? It's just because it's popular doesn't mean it's 100% right. And so, our job here is to have a balanced approach. And there's a lot of problems with the way grains are being processed, and there's a lot of problems with, kind of the farming practices and all that. But it doesn't mean that grains in and of themselves are bad. So let's jump in. Let's peel back some of these layers.
Yeah. Well, one problem I think is if you look at vegetables, vegetables are sort of the common denominator of pretty much any healthy diet. I feel like vegetables are the one piece of the best food plans that you really can't argue about because they're healthy, they're so full of polyphenols, they're so nutrient dense. Some vegetables are more nutrient dense than others, but vegetables we can't argue with. But when you compare vegetables to grains, the nutrient density is completely different. So I think this is a really important point. You know, when you're filling up your plate, you really want to start with the foods that have the greatest nutrient density. And it's not just vegetables. Like I would add to that certain forms of clean protein. You know, I'm a big fan of healthy seafood, wild caught Alaskan salmon. You know, I love wild caught halibut. I'm a big fan of seafood, and that's a form of protein that's really clean and really works for me and my genetics. I also think wild game is also a really good anti-inflammatory protein, and they're very nutrient dense. But you compare them to the grains, and I would just say there's like no comparison in terms of nutrient density.
Yeah, let's peel back and go historical just for a quick second here. We figured out how to harvest these grains, and we figured out how to basically take them and have them create food for us instead of gathering and hunting and a lot of the things that kept us moving, and it became the basis of civilization. And so then we had granaries, and we built walls around those granaries, and then we had transactions around it. And so Babylon was built on grains, right? And so we developed civilization around this stuff. But grains then don't look like grains now. There was a lot of husk, there was a lot of fiber, and there was a lot of other food, right? And so one of the things that happened that is really important to understand in modernity was as we got into these wars, especially World War I and World War II, what happened was entire civilizations were mobilizing their populations to grab a gun and go off and shoot the other guys. So all these guys that were on the land growing vegetables and food and kind of like the traditional family farm, the balance that comes with all the nutrients and the livestock and all these things, got pulled off to war, and we had to get more and more efficient at saying how do we get more calories for more people and make this more streamlined so that we can keep these people eating and moving the machinery of this war and then the post-wartime economy. And so we kind of went down this road of like bigger bang for the buck with grains, and we lost the wisdom of the traditional family farm. So it's like it's too much of a good thing. And then you have the Monsanto and the genetic engineering and then the hybridization and all the things that happened along that trajectory of that arc, where now a lot of it could be considered frankenfood. But if you look at historically how we went into public policy and feeding this civilization and uprooting it from the earth to go off and fight in Europe or something, right? It changed the way we processed food. And when we came back from the war, it was like, oh no, we got this food thing. Now go be a tax consultant or go work for Arthur Andersen now, right? And so it changed the nature of civilization, and now we're having all these troubles with people having abreactions to the grains that they're eating. So historically, a lot of things happened.
Yeah, okay, that was beautiful. I have nothing to add. Like you just really covered it beautifully, and I love when you talk about modernity.
Did I say modernity?
Modernity?
Modernity. Oh, I was like, God, did I say modernity? Modernity.
Modernity. Okay, good.
Modernity, which is where we're all kind of stuck. It's not the modernity ward. So, pros and cons. Let's go there because look, Tom O'Brien's a good friend of both of ours, and I just did an interview with Jeffrey Smith, and he's like, look, you might not be. So I'm obviously on the cons side right now. You might not be allergic to gluten, but all of the Roundup and the glyphosate that's been sprayed on these crops is also making it into the food, and that is also a really potent antibiotic and is causing kind of dysbiosis in your gut. So even if you are balancing your blood sugar and you don't have a gluten issue, Jeffrey Smith and the kind of the anti-GMO guys are out there saying, yeah, but it's still sprayed with poison that your body doesn't like.
That's right. And, kind of picking up on that piece, I think another problem with grains is often they contain mycotoxins. And we talked to Dave Asprey quite a bit about mycotoxins and how some people are more susceptible to the risks and dangers of mycotoxins. These are basically molds that grow in grain when it's stored. So I totally agree with this, kind of the fallout from GMO and how that affects grains. There's also the lack of nutrient density. There's the mycotoxins. And then we talked on a previous show about phytic acid, these anti-nutrients that you can find in grains that block your absorption of minerals. And you can read more about that in the work of Sarah Ballantyne. She wrote the Paleo Approach and the Paleo Approach cookbook. She's really covered this, I think, in a very scientifically rigorous way.
Fantastic. Yeah, and there's a lot there that we're just starting to figure out too, right? Because it's not just what the grain does, it's what it blocks other things, from getting in and doing. So if you're an elite athlete and you want to run a marathon, eating pasta that night before can help. If you're doing the triathlon or whatever. And there's also a lot of vegans. There's also a lot of people kind of pushing that envelope and challenging that paradigm. But grains have fed the world, and grains have allowed us to have a population explosion. So just because we're talking about grains, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're talking about Wonder Bread, right? Bleached white wheat products that have been processed, right? There's quinoa, there's amaranth, there's buckwheat, there's all kinds of other things that are a lot more kind of heritage types of seeds and stalks that the body seems to be doing better with. And I run a lot of IgG, like all kinds of panels on patients looking for specific food allergies. And it's usually the glutens and the kind of the traditional grains that people are having reactions to, whether that's from how it was processed or whether that's just, because the molecule is what it is. I'm seeing a lot of that, and I'm sure you have in your practice as well.
I'm definitely seeing it. And it's, it kind of brings up another argument. I was emailing with Chris Kresser about this particular topic, and he was making the argument that if you look at cultures that have eaten more grains versus cultures that haven't, usually the cultures that had less grain in their diet were healthier. That's sort of one of the evolutionary arguments against grains. So that one is, a little, there's a bit more of a gray area around it, but I think it's another argument to think about as we look at, just the kind of the central role of grains in our life now. I think if you look at the standard American diet, something like, 80% of the calories actually come from grains. I mean, it's just remarkable how many of our calories come from grains. I think it's a little bit lower than that, but the 80% actually comes from refined grains. Like among the grains that we eat in the standard American diet, 80% are actually from refined grains.
Yeah, and so that means it's been processed in some capacity. I mean, you think about the ideal vision of a post-World War II kind of public policy social planner saying, oh no, we got this food thing down, we can move on and do other things, we're going to process the grains and turn them into Wonder Bread, and then we're going to have Spam. And so food became this kind of commoditized thing, and now that we're kind of peeling back the insanity of all that, saying, hey, there's something to this food thing that's beyond how quickly we can process it and how many calories we could pack into it. It's opened up this enormous dialogue of how we veered from the balance of the diets that we've had for generations, and this huge kind of hockey stick explosion of all kinds of lifestyle diseases that kind of coincide with the changing in the food system is not something to be taken lightly. So really, I mean, the balance, and we don't know what the microbiota is supposed to look like. We don't know a lot of things, but we do know that things were working a lot better prior to this industrialized food revolution.
Exactly right. And I think ultimately this comes down to, okay, it's actually pretty complicated, the pros and cons of grains. Mm-hmm. And one way to simplify this and just kind of cut through it is to look at your energy, your health, your sense of vitality if you go 3 weeks off of grains. So what happens? Do you notice no change at all, or do you notice a dramatic difference? My argument is that you're probably going to notice a difference, and it's worth doing this experiment. And that's the way to take the science and kind of the mixed data that we're talking about and just seeing what is true for you.
Yeah, and sushi rice and a loaf of bread are not the same. So you might do well with white rice or brown rice or amaranth, but not well with bread or biscuits and stuff like that. So not all grains are created equal. And so you really have to have an individualized approach to see what sits well with you. Because, one thing that most doctors finally kind of shake their heads and get distressed over is, there's supposed to be an answer. Right? Mm-hmm. And now we realize that whole form of education and didactic thinking just doesn't work. It's not one answer for a generalized population. And if you fall out of the bell curve, then I don't know what to tell you. We have to look at everyone individually, and by we, I mean all of us. So don't wait for your doctor to start doing this. Immediately start listening to your body and seeing what is working for you and what's making you more tired, more cranky, more moody. And there's a pretty good chance that that's something your body is telling you it doesn't like.
That's right. Well, I feel like that's a pretty good summary of the pros and cons of grains. Do you have anything else you want to add, Pedram?
Not at this point. I think, look, we've had a few questions about it. If you guys want more, hit us up at facebook.com/thehealthbridge. And we're here to serve. If you want more on this topic, we'll jump in.
That's right. Okay, everybody, thank you so much for listening, for joining us today. We appreciate your support and interaction. Can't wait to see you next time. This is Dr. Sarah Gottfried. See you.
Bye.